Part 1. The galaxy had one simple rule that every species followed without question. Never go into deep water. The rule was old, older than most civilizations could remember. It was written in every safety manual, taught to every young student, and repeated at every council meeting. The Zorvathi people had bodies made of crystal. When they went too deep in water, the pressure crushed them into dust. The Kelrian bird folks had hollow bones that made flying easy but swimming deadly. Even the Quentari, who looked like frogs and lived near water, refused to swim deeper than a few feet. They all agreed on one thing. Deep water meant death. Water planets were marked with big red warnings on every star map. Ships avoided them. Explorers flew past them. Miners looked for resources anywhere else. These worlds had everything a civilization might need: rare metals, clean energy sources, and room to build colonies. But all of it sat locked beneath oceans that nobody dared to enter. Jake Harrison stood looking out the window of his ship, the horizon's edge. Below him floated a planet called Aquarius 7. It was almost entirely water, with only a few small islands breaking up the endless blue surface. His team had scanned the planet from orbit and found something amazing. The ocean floor held enough valuable minerals to power human colonies for hundreds of years. Sophie Blake walked up beside him. She was his second in command, smart and careful about everything. Her dark hair was tied back in the way all military officers wore it. She carried a data pad in her hands. "The Zorvathi ambassador wants to talk to you again," she said. "He wants us to cancel the mining operation." Jake turned to look at her. "What reason did he give this time?" "The same one as before. He says we are being reckless and dangerous. He sent us files about 12 different species that tried to work underwater. None of them survived." "Those species were not human," Jake said quietly. Sophie raised one eyebrow. "Sir, are you saying we should ignore what the whole galaxy knows? Every civilization out there says deep water is too dangerous." Jake walked over to the computer display and brought up a picture of Aquarius 7. "Look at this, Sophie. Our scans show no dangerous creatures. The pressure is nothing our submarines cannot handle. Humans have been diving in Earth's oceans for hundreds of years. This is what we do." "With respect, Commander, this is not Earth. We do not know what is down there." "That is exactly why we need to look," Jake said with a small smile. "The other species see a wall they cannot climb. We see a door waiting to be opened. That has always been the human way." The door opened and Danny Wright came in. He was the chief engineer, a short man with strong arms and oil stains on his hands. He loved machines more than most people loved their families. He held a data pad and was grinning. "Commander, the submarine is ready. I am calling her the Deep Seeker. She can go down to 8,000 meters, maybe deeper if we push her limits." "Do we have a crew?" Jake asked. "I have got people lined up wanting to join," Danny said, his grin getting wider. "Turns out when you tell folks they will do something no alien has ever done, they get pretty excited." Sophie crossed her arms. "Or they get themselves killed." "You do not have to come, Lieutenant," Jake said gently. Sophie's jaw got tight. "I did not say I was not coming, sir. I said it was dangerous." "Those are two different things." Jake nodded. He understood what she meant. Being scared and being brave were not opposites. Being brave meant doing something even when you were scared. "Good, get the team together. We go down at sunrise." That evening, Jake had to attend a dinner with all the alien ambassadors. Representatives from 20 different species came to the space station, pretending they wanted to welcome the humans. Jake knew the real reason. They wanted to talk him out of diving. Ambassador Threll came up to him first. The Zorvathi's body was made of crystal that broke light into rainbow colors. "Commander Harrison, I beg you to reconsider this foolish plan. The depths are forbidden for good reasons. Ambassador, with respect, they are only forbidden because nobody has built the right tools to explore them safely," Jake said politely. "Tools cannot beat nature," Threll said. His voice sounded like wind chimes ringing. "The pressure alone will destroy any ship. Our submarines are built to handle it." A Kelrian named Vera flew closer. Her feathered wings made soft rustling sounds. "It is not just the pressure, human. There are things in the deep water that we do not talk about. Ancient things. Things that made our ancestors leave water worlds completely." Jake leaned forward, interested now. "What kind of things?" Vera's big eyes blinked fast. "We do not know. Those who went to find out never came back." "Then how do you know there is anything there at all?" Jake asked, making a good point. The question hung in the air with no answer. Jake understood something then. Fear did not always need facts to keep going. Sometimes just not knowing was scary enough. The dinner party went on for hours. Jake kept finding himself back at the window, looking down at Aquarius 7 as it slowly turned below the station. Somewhere down there, under kilometers of water, were answers to questions the galaxy had been too afraid to ask. Tomorrow, humans would dive where nobody else had dared to go. Tomorrow, they would show the galaxy what it meant to be human. The next morning came quickly. Jake barely slept, his mind full of thoughts about what they might find. He got up early and went to the launch bay where the deep seeker waited. The submarine looked like a metal whale, her outer shell made of special materials that could take enormous pressure. She was beautiful in a simple, strong way. Sophie was already there, checking her equipment for the 4th time. Danny was inside the submarine, talking to his machines like they were old friends. The rest of the crew arrived one by one. Lisa Grant would handle navigation. Paul Martinez was in charge of communications. Dr. Ellen Price was their biology expert. Henry Clark knew everything about rocks and minerals. Carl Dixon provided security. Nina Patel understood computer systems better than anyone. All systems are ready. Danny's voice came through the radio. She is ready to swim. Jake climbed through the hatch with Sophie right behind him. Inside, the submarine was tight but well organized. Screens and control panels covered the walls, glowing with soft blue light. Everyone took their positions with smooth, practiced movements. Deep Seeker to Horizon's Edge. We are ready to launch, Jake said into his headset. Copy that. Deep Seeker. Captain Linda Hayes answered from the ship above. Opening bay doors now. Good luck down there. The submarine shook as the mechanical arms let go. For a moment, they hung in the air inside the launch bay. Then the Deep Seeker tilted forward and dropped toward the ocean below. They hit the water hard. The submarine splashed down and immediately began to sink. Through the front window, Jake watched the bright sky quickly turn to darker and darker blue. This was it. They were going where no other species had gone. They were about to discover if the galaxy's fears were real or just old stories told too many times. Part 2. The entry into the water was rougher than Jake expected. The Deep Seeker hit the surface with a huge splash and plunged downward fast. Water rushed past the windows in streams of white bubbles. Then everything smoothed out and they were sinking steadily into the blue. Depth is 50 meters and going down, Lisa called out. Her eyes stayed fixed on her instruments. Jake watched the light change as they sank deeper. At 100 meters, the water was still bright blue. At 200 meters, it turned to a deep indigo color. By 300 meters, they were in a twilight world where sunlight barely reached. I am picking up some interesting readings, Ellen said. She stared at her biology scanner. Small organisms, possibly like plankton. Nothing large yet. Yet, Sophie said quietly. She kept watching her tactical display for any signs of danger. The Deep Seeker kept going down. The pressure gauge climbed higher and higher. At 500 meters, they passed into complete darkness. Danny turned on the exterior lights and suddenly the void came alive with movement. Schools of glowing fish scattered from the light beams. They left trails of bright particles behind them as they swam away. Larger shapes moved at the edge of what they could see. Curious but careful. The alien ocean was full of life. This is incredible, Ellen said. She had forgotten to be nervous. Look at how many different species there are. These organisms have lived here with nobody studying them. Henry was just as excited about his readings. The mineral levels are even higher than we thought. There is enough rare material down here to supply all human space for decades. Depth is 1,200 meters, Lisa announced. Pressure is holding steady. The hull is at 100% strength. Jake let himself relax a little. The Deep Seeker was working perfectly. Despite everything the Council had warned them about, they had not seen anything hostile. Maybe the fears really were unfounded. At 2,000 meters, they reached the first thermal vent. Super hot water poured out of a crack in the ocean floor. Strange worms that looked like tubes swayed in the current around it. Ellen wanted to stop and collect samples, but Jake decided to keep going. They could explore these wonders more carefully once they proved the dive was safe. The descent continued. 3,000 meters. 4,000. The pressure reading climbed to levels that would have crushed any Council species into paste. But the Deep Seeker's hull did not even make a sound of stress. Commander, I am getting some unusual readings, Paul said suddenly. There is something below us. Something big. Sophie's hands moved to the weapon controls. How big? I cannot get a clear reading. The density is off my charts. It is like the scanner is having trouble figuring out what it is. Jake leaned forward and looked into the darkness below them. The deep seeker's lights could only reach about 50 meters. They showed nothing but more empty water and a few surprised fish. Could it be rocks? Henry suggested. Maybe an unusual rock formation on the ocean floor? Rocks do not move, Paul said. His voice was tight with tension. Whatever it is rising toward us. The crew fell silent. Everyone watched their screens carefully. Jake felt his heart beat faster despite his training. This was the moment the council had warned them about. Something from the depths. Something ancient and dangerous. Should we go up? Sophie asked. Her hand was ready over the controls that would take them to the surface. Jake thought about their options. They could run back to the horizon's edge and report that the council was right. Or they could stay and face whatever was coming. They could prove that humans did not run from the unknown. Hold position, he decided. Let us see what we are dealing with. The tension in the submarine was thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone waited as the thing on the sensors kept rising. It grew larger as it got closer. Jake found himself gripping the armrest of his chair hard, ready for anything. Then it came into the light and the entire crew gasped. It was not a monster. It was a machine. The structure was enormous. It was made of metal and crystal mixed together, extending far beyond where their lights could reach. As the Deep Seeker's beams moved across its surface, they could see detailed carvings and symbols. The technology was clearly made by intelligent beings, but it was unlike anything in the current galactic records. It is a city, Ellen whispered. Or it was one. Look at how it is built, she was right. As their eyes got used to what they were seeing, they could make out buildings and walkways. There were even things that might have been windows. The entire complex seemed to be rising slowly from the ocean floor. Some kind of floating system was still working after who knew how many centuries. Paul, are you recording this? Jake asked. Every second, sir. Lisa, take us closer. Move slowly. The Deep Seeker turned toward the ancient structure. Her lights showed more details with each moment that passed. The metal parts were corroded and old, but the crystal pieces remained clear. They glowed faintly with their own internal light. Commander, this changes everything, Henry said. Wonder filled his voice. This proves there was an advanced civilization here, one that lived underwater, and one that apparently died, Sophie added darkly. Maybe the Council's fears are not so crazy after all. Jake stared at the ruins. His mind was racing with thoughts. The galaxy believed deep water meant death, but here was proof that someone had not only survived in it but had built great things. What happened to them? And more importantly, could it happen to humans? We need to explore this, Jake said. Danny, can we attach to that structure? Give me a few minutes to find a stable spot, Danny said. He was already running calculations on his computer. As the Deep Seeker moved alongside the ancient city, Jake could not shake a feeling. It felt like they were being watched. Not by anything alive necessarily, but by history itself. They were the first to see this place in perhaps millions of years. The first, but Jake promised himself they would not be the last. Danny found a good docking spot on a platform that had somehow stayed strong despite the passage of time. The submarine's clamps attached with a solid thunk. Through the window, the crew could see corridors leading deeper into the city. The crystal walls pulsed with that strange internal light. The structure is filled with water, Ellen reported after checking her instruments. We will need to wear our underwater suits to go outside, Jake nodded. Sophie, Carl, you come with me. Everyone else stays with the Deep Seeker and keeps watching the instruments. If anything goes wrong, you head straight back to the surface. Not without you, Danny said firmly. That is an order, Chief. Danny's jaw got tight, but he nodded. Yes, Commander. The three of them put on their underwater suits. The suits were heavy but flexible, designed for deep sea work. They had built-in lights, communication systems, and 30 hours of oxygen. Each suit was like a small spaceship wrapped around a person. Jake checked Sophie's seals, she checked his, and Carl checked his own with practiced movements. Remember, we are just looking around, Jake said as they entered the airlock. We watch, we record, we do not touch anything we do not understand. In other words, nothing at all, Sophie said. Though she was trying to joke, her voice showed she was nervous. The airlock filled with water. The pressure balanced out. Then the outer door opened. Jake pushed off gently. His suit's small thrusters guided him toward the nearest entrance to the city. The water here was strangely clear, as if the structure itself was cleaning it. They entered a wide corridor carved from the same crystal material. The walls were covered in symbols that seemed to move and change in the light. Jake ran his gloved hand across them. He could feel bumps and ridges under his fingers. "Paul, are you getting this video?" he asked. "Crystal clear." Paul's voice came through his helmet. "I am running the symbols through our translation database, but no matches yet." They moved deeper into the structure. Their lights showed rooms of different sizes. Some looked like living quarters. There were raised platforms that might have been beds and holes in the walls that could have held belongings. Other rooms looked more functional, filled with equipment too old and broken to identify. "Look at this," Carl called from a side room. Jake and Sophie swam over to join him. They found what was clearly a control room. Panels lined the walls, and in the center sat a large chair facing multiple screens. All the screens were dark. Ellen's voice came through the radio. "Commander, I am analyzing water samples from inside the structure. The mineral composition is strange. It is almost like it was designed to preserve things rather than break them down." "Preserve what?" Sophie asked. "Maybe this," Jake said. He pointed to one of the control panels. Unlike all the others, this one showed a faint glow. A tiny indicator light had somehow survived thousands of years underwater. "Danny, can you see this through my helmet camera?" "I see it. That is a power source still active after all this time." "Incredible." Jake stared at the glowing light. Somewhere in this ancient city, power still flowed. The builders had made something that lasted longer than most civilizations existed. What else had they left behind? Part 3, they continued exploring the underwater city, moving from room to room like ghosts visiting a forgotten world. Each chamber told a story about the people who had lived here. A large room appeared to be a gathering place, with seating arranged in circles around a central platform. Another chamber held what looked like artistic displays, sculptures frozen in time beneath the water. This was not just a city, Sophie said as they floated through a hallway lined with decorations. This was a culture. They had art and community spaces and technology. They were like us. "They were better than us in some ways," Jake said quietly. "They conquered the deep ocean and made it their home. And then they vanished," Carl added. "But why?" That question bothered Jake as they explored. The city showed no signs of disaster. There was no damage from war or earthquakes or floods. It was as if the people who lived here had simply left one day and never came back. They were about to return to the Deep Seeker when Ellen's voice cut through the radio. She sounded urgent and excited. "Commander, you need to hear this. I've been studying the structure's makeup more closely. The crystal is not natural. It was grown like a plant, and it is still alive." "What do you mean alive?" Jake asked. "I mean it is part biological and part technological. The crystal is actually an organism, or it was. It has been designed to maintain the structure and preserve it. That is why everything is still in good shape." Sophie looked around at the glowing walls with new understanding. "So the whole city is one giant living thing?" "More like a partnership," Ellen explained. "The builders and the crystal worked together. The crystal kept their city safe, and they must have taken care of it in return." Jake felt a chill run down his back. If the crystal is still alive and still taking care of the structure after all this time, what is it waiting for? Before anyone could answer, the lights in the corridor suddenly got brighter. All around them, the crystal walls began to pulse more strongly. The symbols started to move, flowing across the surfaces like water. "Commander," Danny's voice came through with urgency. "I am reading massive power changes throughout the structure. Something is turning on." "Get back to the Deep Seeker now," Jake ordered. They kicked off from the walls and swam as fast as their suits would allow. Behind them, the city was waking up. Lights blazed in windows and corridors that had been dark moments before. The sound of ancient machines hummed through the water. They reached the submarine and scrambled through the airlock. As soon as the inner door sealed, Danny hit the release on the docking clamps. "What did you do in there?" he demanded. "Nothing," Jake insisted. "We just looked around." Well, something woke it up. Through the window, they watched as the entire structure began to rise faster. It was ascending toward the surface. The crystal pulsed in rhythm, almost like it was breathing. "It is beautiful," Ellen whispered. "It is terrifying," Sophie corrected. "It is both," Jake said, "and we need to follow it. Lisa, match how fast it is rising. Paul, send a message to the horizon's edge. Tell them we are coming up and we are bringing company." As the Deep Seeker rose alongside the ancient city, Jake wondered what would happen when it reached the surface. Would it just float there? A monument to a lost civilization? Or was something else about to happen? Something the builders had planned for all those years ago. The ascent took time. The darkness gradually gave way to lighter water. Above them, the surface beckoned with its promise of answers. 2 hours later, the deep seeker broke through the surface. Water streamed off her hull as she bobbed in gentle waves. But the submarine was not the most remarkable sight. Behind them, the ancient city had emerged like a mountain rising from the sea. Its crystal towers caught the sunlight and scattered it into 1,000 colors. It was one of the most beautiful things Jake had ever seen. "Horizon's Edge, are you seeing this?" Jake transmitted to the ship in orbit. "We see it, Deep Seeker," came the response from Captain Linda Hayes. "We have every sensor pointed at that structure." "What is it?" "An underwater city, Captain. It is intact and apparently still working. We are not sure how old it is, but it is older than any known galactic civilization." There was a pause. "The council ships are going crazy up here. The Zorvathi are demanding answers, and the Kelrians are calling it a sign of the end times. Half the delegates want you arrested, and the other half want to give you medals." "Typical day at work," Sophie muttered. Jake smiled slightly. "Captain, request permission to board the structure again. Now that it has surfaced, we can do a proper exploration." "Permission denied, Commander. The Council has declared the structure off-limits until a proper investigation team can be put together. You are ordered to return to the Horizon's Edge immediately." Jake looked at the magnificent city floating beside them. To come this far and be ordered to leave felt wrong, but he understood the politics of it. The discovery was too big for humanity to claim alone. "Understood, Captain. We are heading up now." The Deep Seeker's engines came to life, but before they could move, every screen in the submarine suddenly turned on. The crew jumped as images appeared. Not random noise, but clear, purposeful pictures. "What in the world?" Danny breathed. The screens showed scenes from the city's past. Beings unlike any species in the current galaxy moved through the corridors. Their bodies were adapted for underwater life. They had smooth, streamlined forms with webbed hands and feet. They moved through the water with easy grace. But what struck Jake most was their eyes. Large and expressive, filled with intelligence and emotion. "It is a recording," Ellen said. "The city is showing us its history." They watched, unable to look away as the story unfolded. The beings, whom Ellen started calling the Aquarians for lack of a better name, had built a magnificent civilization beneath the waves. They had technology and art and science. They had done well in an environment that the current galaxy considered impossible for advanced life. But then the images changed. The Aquarians began looking upward, toward the surface and beyond. They built devices and machines that could break through the atmosphere. They had discovered that they were not alone in the universe. They made contact with species above the water, Henry realized. They reached out to the surface dwellers. The next images showed meetings between the Aquarians and other beings. The other species looked somewhat like modern council races. At first, the meetings were peaceful, filled with wonder and exchange of knowledge. But then something changed. Fear entered the interactions. The surface species began to see the Aquarians not as equals but as threats. They were afraid, Sophie said softly. Afraid of beings that could survive where they could not. The final images were the hardest to watch. The Aquarians, faced with growing hatred and isolation, made a choice. Rather than fight, they left. They took their cities deep below the surface, beyond the reach of those who feared them. The crystal technology that Ellen had identified was their final gift. A system designed to preserve their culture until a time when the galaxy might be ready to understand. The screens went dark. The message was complete. In the silence that followed, Jake felt the weight of what they had witnessed. The Aquarians had not died out. They had hidden themselves, waiting for a species brave enough or foolish enough to venture into the depths. "They were waiting for us," he said quietly, "for someone who would not be afraid." "Commander, we are receiving a call from the Horizon's Edge," Paul interrupted. "The Council wants to speak with you directly," Jake sighed. "Put them through." Ambassador Threll's crystal face appeared on the main screen. His expression was hard to read. "Commander Harrison, you have violated every warning and every rule established by centuries of galactic wisdom." "Ambassador." "With respect, however," Threll continued, and Jake thought he heard something like wonder in the alien's voice. "You have also made the most significant archaeological discovery in galactic history. The Council is calling an emergency meeting. Your presence is requested." The next few hours passed in a blur. The Deep Seeker returned to the horizon's edge. Jake and his crew were immediately taken to the station's council chambers. Representatives from every major species had gathered. Their attention was fixed on the holographic display showing the floating city. Jake stood before them and presented what they had found. He showed them the recordings and explained the Aquarian's story. He made his case for more exploration. This city is a gift, he concluded. A time capsule left by a species that wanted to be understood. They left because of fear. But they left the door open for anyone brave enough to look. Humanity looked and we found something wonderful. You found a grave, a Kellrian delegate argued. A monument to a dead civilization that serves only as a warning. The deep water is death as it has always been. With respect, the Aquarians did not die because of the water. They lived well in it. They left because of prejudice, because the galaxy was not ready for them. Threll's voice rang out clearly. And you believe the galaxy is ready now, human? Jake met the ambassador's crystal gaze without flinching. I believe we will never be ready if we keep running from what scares us. Part 4. The debate in the council chambers went on for hours. Jake stood at the center while alien representatives argued around him. Some wanted to seal the city and prevent any further exploration. They said it was too dangerous and that humanity had already taken too many risks. Others, surprisingly, agreed with the human position. The Quintari representative spoke with passion. Her name was Mira, and she was an amphibian who had always felt caught between two worlds. This is our chance to learn from beings who mastered an environment we abandoned. We gave up the water out of fear. The Aquarians embraced it. We must study what they left behind. A young Zorvathi scientist named Vex surprised everyone by supporting the exploration. Our fear of water has limited our understanding of the universe. Perhaps it is time to overcome that fear with knowledge rather than avoidance. But others remained unconvinced. An old Kellrian elder argued that the city should be left alone as a memorial. We do not disturb graves, she said. This place is sacred in its abandonment. It is not a grave, Jake countered. The Aquarians did not die here, they left. And they left this city as a message, not a warning. They want to be found. They want to be understood. The argument went back and forth. Jake presented the evidence again and again. The recordings showed clearly that the Aquarians had not fled in terror. They had left in sadness, hoping that one day the galaxy would be different. One day someone would come looking. Finally, after what felt like days but was only 6 hours, the council reached a decision. The vote was close but clear. The city would be studied under strict rules and with representatives from multiple species. Humanity, having made the initial discovery, would lead the expedition. But they would not work alone. It was not perfect, but it was a start. As the council session ended and delegates began to leave, Jake found himself approached by Ambassador Threll. The Zorvathi studied him for a long moment with his crystalline eyes. You humans are either the bravest species in the galaxy or the most foolish. I have not yet decided which. Jake smiled. Maybe we are both, Ambassador. Maybe that is what it takes. Perhaps, Threll said thoughtfully, or perhaps you simply have not yet learned what the rest of us know. That some boundaries exist for good reason. And perhaps, Jake said gently, some boundaries exist only because no one has tried to cross them yet. Threll was quiet for a moment. Then something that might have been a smile crossed his crystal features. You may be right, human. Time will tell. I look forward to working with you on this project. Jake was surprised. You are joining the expedition? Someone must ensure you do not get yourself killed, Threll said. And I confess I am curious. My people have feared water for so long that we forgot how to ask why. You have reminded us that questions are more valuable than fear. Over the next few weeks, preparations began for the largest scientific project in galactic history. Ships from a dozen species arrived at Aquarius 7. A permanent station was built on the largest platform of the floating city. Scientists, engineers, and explorers from across the galaxy came together with one goal. Understand the Aquarians? Jake watched it all happen with a sense of wonder. What had started as a simple mining survey had turned into something much bigger. The floating city became a symbol, a reminder that the galaxy still had mysteries to solve, and that working together made solving them possible. Sophie was put in charge of security for the research station. She worked with officers from 3 other species to create protocols that kept everyone safe. Carl became her right hand, learning to communicate with aliens who had very different ideas about what security meant. Danny and the Zorvathi engineer Vex became an unlikely team. Where Danny worked by instinct and feel, Vex worked with mathematical precision. Together, they began to unlock the secrets of the crystal technology. They learned how to communicate with it using harmonic frequencies. When they played the right sounds, hidden chambers opened and new archives were revealed. Ellen worked with a Kelrian biologist named Tara. The Birdwoman's aerial perspective on ocean systems helped Ellen understand things she had never considered. Together, they mapped thousands of deep-sea species that the Aquarians had cataloged. Some of these creatures still existed on water worlds across the galaxy. Henry partnered with a Quintari geologist. They studied the mineral composition of the ocean floor and learned how the Aquarians had harvested resources without destroying the environment. It was knowledge that could change how the entire galaxy approached mining operations. Lisa, Paul, and Nina worked on translating the Aquarian language. It was slow work, but piece by piece they began to understand the symbols that covered every wall. The Aquarians had left behind libraries of information. History, science, art, philosophy, an entire civilization captured in crystal and light. 3 months after the initial discovery, Jake stood in what had been identified as the central library of the city. Holographic displays now filled the chamber, showing translated texts and images from the Aquarian database. He was reading about their exploration of other water worlds when Sophie found him. "You should see what Ellen and Tara discovered in the biological archives," she said. Her earlier doubt had been replaced by genuine excitement. The Aquarians had mapped thousands of deep-sea species. They were explorers, Jake. They did not just conquer one ocean. They traveled to dozens of them across the galaxy. "Any clues about where they went?" Jake asked. It was the question that had bothered him since they first found the city. "That is the interesting part," Sophie said. "According to their records, they did not leave the planet." "They went deeper." Jake turned to her, surprised. "Deeper than the city?" "Much deeper. The ocean trenches, the abyssal zones where even our current technology can barely reach. They built new cities down there, away from the surface species completely. And Jake, the final entries suggest they might still be there." The words hung in the air between them. Somewhere on this world, perhaps in trenches so deep that no one had thought to explore them, the Aquarians could still exist, living in depths that no one had dared to imagine. "We need to organize an expedition," Jake said immediately. "Already being planned. The council approved it this morning. But there is a condition." "What condition?" "They want the Deep Seeker crew to lead it, but they insist on a fully mixed team. Humans, Zorvathi, Kelrians, Quintari, everyone working together." Jake thought about this. It would be complicated. Different species had different needs and different fears, different ways of doing things. But maybe that was the point. The Aquarians had been isolated because of their differences. This new expedition would succeed by bringing differences together. "I can work with that," he said. The preparations took another month. The Deep Seeker went through major changes. The Zorvathi contributed advanced hull strengthening. The Kelrians provided better life support systems. The Quintari shared their knowledge of how to adapt to pressure changes. Each species brought their best technology and their best people. The crew grew as well. Danny now worked side by side with Vex, who brought precision to balance Danny's intuition. Ellen teamed up with Tara, whose understanding of flight gave new insight into how creatures moved through water. Even Sophie, who had been resistant to change at first, found herself working well with a Quintari security officer named Cree. Cree understood water-based tactics better than any human. On the day of the launch, Jake stood before his expanded crew. 12 beings from 6 different species, all preparing to venture into the unknown together. They stood in the launch bay, a mix of body types and cultures united by curiosity and courage. The Aquarians left because the galaxy feared what they represented. Jake said to them, "Today we are going to find them. Not as conquerors or scientists seeking specimens to study, but as friends, as a galaxy that is finally ready to understand." Vex spoke up, his crystal body refracting the lights. "We go together into depths that each of our species feared alone. This is how it should be." Tara ruffled her feathers in agreement. "The sky taught me to respect the ground. Today the ground teaches me to respect the water." Cree, the Quintari, added, "My people left the deep water long ago. Today we return, not in shame, but in wonder." The words were simple but powerful. Each species had let fear hold them back. Now they were moving forward together. The new Deep Seeker descended through familiar waters. past the depth where they had found the city, past the thermal vents and glowing creatures, into regions so deep that the pressure would have crushed their original vessel instantly. But the improved submarine, built with technology from multiple civilizations, handled it easily. At 10,000 meters, they detected the first structure. At 12,000, they found a whole network of cities connected by lit tunnels that stretched across the ocean floor. And at 15,000 meters, in the deepest trench on the planet, they found what they were looking for. Part 5, the Aquarians were there. Their cities glowed with life and activity in the deepest part of the ocean. Lights moved through windows and along walkways. Shapes swam between buildings with purpose and grace. After thousands of years of hiding, the ancient civilization was still alive. When the Deep Seeker's lights touched the nearest city, the movement stopped. For a moment, everything was still. Then slowly, carefully, figures began to emerge from the structures. They swam toward the submarine, their bioluminescent bodies pulsing with patterns of light. Are they communicating? Ellen asked, watching her instruments carefully. I think so, Paul said. He was working frantically at his translation console. The light patterns, they are similar to the symbols we found in the floating city. Give me a minute. The Aquarians circled the submarine slowly. They did not seem afraid or aggressive. More like curious. Like they had been waiting a long time for this moment. Got it, Paul said suddenly. The translation is rough, but I think they are saying welcome. They say they have been waiting. Jake felt a lump form in his throat. After all this time, after hiding from a galaxy that feared them, the Aquarians had not given up hope. They had believed that someday someone would come looking with friendship instead of fear. Can we respond? He asked. I can try to program our lights to match their patterns, Paul said. His fingers moved quickly across his controls. What do you want to say? Jake thought for a moment. What do you say to a civilization you thought was lost? What words could bridge thousands of years of separation? Tell them we come in peace. Tell them the galaxy is ready to listen now. Paul worked his magic with the lights. The Deep Seeker's exterior illumination began to pulse in patterns, copying what the Aquarians had shown them. It was clumsy and probably full of mistakes, but the intent was clear. The Aquarians responded immediately. Their light patterns became more excited, more joyful. More of them emerged from the cities until hundreds surrounded the submarine. Then, in a gesture that needed no translation, they began to guide the Deep Seeker toward the largest structure. They want us to follow, Lisa said. Then let us follow, Jake replied. The submarine moved slowly through the water, surrounded by an escort of Aquarian people. They led the crew to a massive building at the center of the city. An entrance large enough for the Deep Seeker opened, and they were guided inside to a docking platform. The chamber is flooding with breathable atmosphere, Ellen reported in amazement. They are creating an environment we can survive in. The crew suited up and exited the submarine. They stepped onto the platform to find themselves in a large chamber. The walls were the same living crystal as the floating city, but these were brighter, healthier, and standing before them were 3 Aquarians who had altered their appearance somehow to breathe air. The translation process was slow at first. The Aquarians spoke in sounds that mixed words with harmonic tones. But Paul's programs were learning quickly. Within an hour, basic communication was possible. The leader of the Aquarians introduced herself as Sela. She was tall and graceful, with skin that shimmered like pearls and eyes that held ancient wisdom. She explained that her people had been watching the surface world for generations. They had seen the galaxy change and grow. They had waited for the right time to reveal themselves again. We knew humans had come to our world, Sela said through the translator. We watched your vessel descend where others would not dare. We saw courage where the galaxy had shown only fear. That is when we decided to wake the floating city, to send our message. You wanted to be found, Jake said. We have always wanted to be found, Sela replied, but by the right people, by those who seek understanding rather than conquest, by those who see difference as wonder rather than threat. Vex stepped forward, his crystal body catching the light. My people feared you. Feared what we did not understand. I am ashamed of that fear. Sela looked at him kindly. Fear is natural when facing the unknown. It is what you do with that fear that matters. You chose to overcome it. That is worthy of respect. Over the next few days, the mixed species crew learned about the Aquarian civilization. They had not been idle during their long isolation. They had continued to advance their technology, to explore the deepest parts of the ocean, to study life in ways that surface dwellers never could. They had developed medicine that could heal injuries thought impossible to fix. They had learned to cultivate food sources that needed no sunlight. They had mastered energy systems that worked in harmony with ocean currents rather than fighting against them, and they were willing to share it all. We withdrew from the galaxy in sadness, Sela explained during one of many meetings, but we never stopped hoping that one day we would return. Now that day has come. We offer our knowledge freely to those willing to learn. The implications were staggering. The Aquarian technology could solve problems that had plagued the galaxy for centuries. Water worlds could be colonized and developed without destroying their ecosystems. Deep-sea mining could be done safely and sustainably. Medical advances could save countless lives. But more than the technology, the Aquarians offered something else. They offered proof that difference did not have to mean division, that species could thrive in environments others found impossible, that the galaxy was big enough for everyone. Ellen spent days working with Aquarian biologists. They showed her species that had never been classified, ecosystems that existed in complete darkness, life that thrived under pressure that would crush most beings. Each discovery filled her with wonder. Henry worked with Aquarian geologists who taught him how to read the ocean floor like a book. Every rock, every vent, every ridge told a story about the planet's history. They showed him mining techniques that took only what was needed and left the environment healthy. Danny and Vex studied the crystal technology with Aquarian engineers. They learned that it was not just a building material, but a living partnership between the Aquarians and a unique organism they had cultivated over millennia. The crystals could grow into any shape needed, repair themselves when damaged, and would last for thousands of years with minimal care. Sophie and Cree trained with Aquarian security forces. They learned about threats that existed only in deep water and how to handle them. More importantly, they learned about cooperation between species with very different abilities. The Aquarians had developed tactics that used each member's strengths rather than trying to force everyone into the same role. As the days turned into weeks, something remarkable happened. The barriers between species began to break down. Humans, Zorvathi, Kelrians, Quentari, and Aquarians worked together not as separate groups but as one team. They ate meals together, shared stories, and learned from each other. Jake watched it all happen with quiet satisfaction. This was what he had hoped for. Not just discovering a lost civilization, but building bridges between civilizations that existed now. One evening, he stood with Sela on a platform overlooking the deep-sea city. Lights twinkled in the darkness like underwater stars. Schools of fish swam past in organized patterns. It was peaceful in a way that the surface world rarely was. "Your people took a great risk coming here," Sela said. "The others in your galaxy would have let fear stop them." "Humans do not always listen to what we should fear," Jake admitted. "Sometimes that gets us in trouble, but sometimes it leads us to moments like this." "What will happen now?" Sela asked. "When you return to the surface and tell the galaxy what you found?" Jake thought about it. "I think things will change. Not overnight, but gradually. You have shown us that water worlds are not dead zones, but homes to thriving civilizations. That will change how we see a third of the planets in the galaxy. And your people?" Sela pressed. "How will they react to us?" "Some will be afraid," Jake said honestly. "Fear does not disappear just because it should. But others will be amazed. They will want to learn from you, work with you, maybe even live alongside you. We will build new communities together, places where surface dwellers and deep-sea dwellers can both thrive." Sela smiled, a gesture that translated across all species. "That is what we hoped for. Not to return to the galaxy we left, but to help build a better one." 6 months after the initial discovery, the Galactic Council held a ceremony on Aquarius 7. The floating city had become a symbol of cooperation between species. Research stations dotted its platforms and living quarters housed scientists from across the galaxy. Below the surface, in the deep trenches, construction had begun on the first integrated settlement, a place where beings who breathed air and beings who breathed water could live together in harmony. Jake stood at the ceremony watching representatives from the council formally welcome the Aquarians back into the galactic community. Sela accepted their greeting with grace, speaking about hope and second chances and the courage to face fear. Ambassador Threll approached Jake during the reception. The Zorvathi had changed over the past months. He spent time each week in a specially designed submarine, exploring the shallow waters of Aquarius 7. He said it helped him understand what his people had been missing. "You were right, Commander," Threll said. "Some boundaries exist only because we do not try to cross them." "And you were right too," Jake replied. "Some boundaries exist for good,